In opening government, we have the team from Korea called DEBRIDGE. Please stand up. Opening opposition, we have the team from Korea called EWHA Team 1. Closing government, we have another team from Korea. Is it KDS, Korea Debate University Society, right? No. Okay, okay, sorry. And then a team from a place, not a country, closing opposition, the University of Macau, Team 1. There are two great judges who are both pretty and young. Miss Valerie from the Philippines, University of PM, right? And Miss Cynthia Lu, formerly from Assumption University, now a director of debate in high school, and I don't know what else she's doing. And those are all the students. Where's my coffee? Okay, all the audiences, please, if you have to speak, okay, you have to leave the room. Or speak without sound. And please do not disrupt the speaker by moving around and taking pictures of them. And be respectful. All of you speak from here and speak as loud as you can. Just sitting in front, but there are people at the back who want to hear you. Okay? Oh, there's no microphone. The organizers have very humbly requested that all of them use the mic. Okay? All the mic. For both the speaker and the viewer, you grab the mic. Okay? You have it there. You have it there. Okay. There's one there. Put it in the middle. I will leave the mic here. Yeah. That's sharp, loudly.
Do you want to record it?
Yeah, I can record it.
Can we not use
They actually, organizers are saying to use the mic because they want to record it in the next room. I don't know.
Who's organizing? Where is it?
I don't think that's very necessary.
Please use mic. Yeah, please.
Yes.
Oh, you want to be hands-free, right? Take a stand. Is a stand? Okay, you decide whether to be nice or not. Okay? I've turned it off. You want to turn it on? If you turn it on too long, the battery may run out. So I turn it off now. Okay? What's the motion?
This was supposed equal opportunity legislation should extend to religious.
Oh, okay. You don't have to use it, but you can use it. It's nice. Okay, our time keep. At 1, I'll clap quite loud. At 6, I'll clap. At 7, I'll clap twice. And at 7:20, I'll clap 3 times. I call the House to order, and I invite the first speaker from the opening government to start the meeting.
Mr. Speaker and members of this House, in most liberal democratic countries, the constitutions clearly say that you have actually equal opportunity, get the job, and get the job that you actually want, regardless of your race, regardless of your race, regardless of your ethnicity. And our side of the House, especially from the opening government, clearly thinks that we believe that current status quo actually limits the choices of people and actually at the same time brings a lot of harm. And but by our policy, we believe that it actually brings a lot of benefits in the status quo. So, Mr. Speaker, in the status quo, equal opportunity legislation exists. But Mr. Speaker, what the problem lies in today's debate is that equal opportunity legislation don't equally actually apply to religious religious institutions. And we believe that this is exactly where the problem lies, because it actually limits the choice of the people. It actually undermines the role of government. So, no, thank you, sir. Having said that, I would like to define some of the important terms that are important in today's debate. Firstly, we define religious institutions such all kinds of institutions that have close links with religion, such as religious NGO and university, and also religious foundation that actually require the job employees to be religiously have the same religion in those foundations. And we also define equal opportunity legislation as the same mechanism that exists in the status quo in the society. What we mean by that, we actually give equal access to employment, and we are going to scrap the required qualification to actually enter the company or enter the religious institution. And our side has clear mechanism. We're just going to apply the same mechanism that exists in today's society for normal companies, for other institutions, to actually apply to the religious institutions. So having said that, we have three arguments in today's debate. Firstly, we think that it actually limits the choices of the people. And secondly, we think that it undermines the role of government. Under government. So I'll talk about this point on the principle level, and my next speaker will talk to you about on a practical level about how this motion will bring benefits and about the harms that will be brought about if we don't actually change the status quo. So having said that, moving on to the first argument, we think that the status quo, if you don't change the status quo, limits the choices of the people. Let me give you two levels on this analysis. Firstly, about freedom of choice, and secondly, freedom of religion. Moving on to the first analysis. In the status quo, all the people should have equal rights and equal opportunity to actually apply for the job. But what we believe that in the status quo, these people are not cannot actually apply for the jobs that they want in other religious institutions, and we believe that it actually limits the freedom of choice for other people, because these people cannot actually apply. These people are actually blocked from applying for this job. No, thank you, sir. On to the second level of analysis about freedom of religion. And before I go, let me make it really clear. No, thank you, ma'am. The nature of religious institutions. When you actually look at the society and economy in many other liberal democratic countries, the religious institutions are very powerful, and they are actually widespread throughout the society. So whenever you actually apply for the jobs in the religious institution, you're actually likely to face the companies that have the religious faith. And this clearly shows that if you really want that job, it is actually inducing you to actually change your religion. And we think that it actually clearly contradicts the freedom of religion, because now you have a lot of tools, you have really powerful tools to actually induce these people, and therefore we think that this is unfair, and this is against the freedom of religion. So therefore we believe that equal opportunity legislation should be applied to religious institutions to actually guarantee the choices that people have in the status quo. Yes, sir.
The reason why the employers want to hire those people who share the same religious belief is because they find them the most suitable and the most capable to do their job. I believe that those employers actually have the right to decide which one to hire.
No, Mr. Speaker, what you're trying to say is that there are a lot of people who desperately need the job. What we say is that it is really unfair for us to actually block even like the registration, even the application, even the opportunity to apply for the company, and therefore it is unfair. And secondly, moving on to the second argument, we believe that it actually now the status quo actually undermines the role of government. We believe that the role of government is actually protect equal rights and for every people, and actually provide equal opportunities for the people to have the jobs that they want. But Mr. Speaker, in the status quo, this applies to only companies, which actually leads to double standards of the government. We believe that it actually illegitimize the government, because on the other side, the government has this policy, but for this religious institution, they're really powerful and widespread in the society. They're actually protecting those religious institutions, and therefore we strongly believe that the government actually illegitimize the government and illegitimize the government. But Mr. Speaker, when we actually apply equal opportunity legislation to religious institutions, we believe that this kind of double standard will be removed. It will not be it will stop illegitimizing the government. So, Mr. Speaker and members of this House, we've clearly told you that there is a clear harm that's actually blocking people from applying for the job that they want in the first place. And therefore, we believe that if you don't change the status quo right now, you keep actually harming the freedom of choices the people have, which is the fundamental rights of the society. And also, we believe that at the same time, it actually undermines the role of government, which is powerful on the principle level. So my next speaker will come up to you and talk to you about tangible harms and benefits from the motion. And for these reasons, we are very proud to support. Thank you.
We thank the first speaker for his speech. Now invite the first speaker from the opening opposition.
On the opposite side, what we like to believe in the first place, to frame this debate into this practice, is that we believe that this government secular power should be completely separate from the religious institutions. Just like the religious institutions are completely separate from the government, and they're on their realms of government and religious institution, they respect each other's identity, respect each other's the will to do something else. So what the government is proposing right now is that they are trying to justify, to make it legitimate, the government is trying to arbitrarily to go into the religious institution or any kind of foundations or companies or universities that based on their religion, saying that we have the enough power to distort you. If it goes against your will, still it doesn't matter because we are the government. And we are strongly opposed to this kind of case, and we believe the complete separation from the government and between government and religious institutions should be promoted. And secondly, on our framework, we oppose any preemptive measure or preemptive intervention to promote what the government secular will try to present. So we believe that this complete separation is realized if this motion fails. So before I introduce my substantive arguments, I'd like to give you a rebuttal to this case. Okay, firstly, they talked about how universities and NGOs, based on their religion, they try, what they were saying is that they should make they should implement equal opportunity legislation to make sure that everybody gets equal chance. Okay, the universities and NGOs are based on this religious practice, like EWHA Women's University, they are based on Christianity, right? These kind of universities, when they select employers, the first criteria is not whether you are Christian or other kind of things. And secondly, the first thing they consider when selecting employment is a certificate, whether you have enough legitimate criteria for the employment. So what they're saying about, the only reason that they're proposing to us to, intervene in this religious practice just because, we want to make sure that discrimination will not happen. Okay, firstly, their prioritization is wrong. And secondly, even if there's some kind of criteria exists that religion is really important, we think that it's perfectly the private company's right or any kind of foundation, religious foundation right to decide whichever employers they want to select in the first place. Government cannot just go and say, we want this candidate to be selected, so what you need to do is change everything, and we are perfectly legitimate to go against your criteria to select the people you want. We think that this is unfair and this is not legitimate in the first place. Because what the government is doing is government is arbitrarily breaking the promise between the state, between the relationship between the state or the government and this private entity, the religious institutions, and instead of just respecting to each other, right? Sit down, please. So having said having said the rebuttals, I'd like to move on to our substantive. We'll give you three levels of arguments. Okay, first argument will be the justification. Whether do the people want government intervention? And second argument will be harms of intervention if this motion passes. And last argument will be long-term effect of this case if this motion passes. Okay, moving on to my first argument, justification. Do they want government? Do the society want government intervention? We don't think so. First level analysis. In the perspective of companies, we believe that it's a perfectly individual's choice. I mean, the company's right to select the people you want. Maybe some companies, even though based on religious foundation, they might think that religion is not that important. They might consider the certificate is more important, so they select people regardless of religion. We think that's fine. And another company might come up here and tell you that this religious faith is the most crucial important thing, like when they enter NGO or something like that. We think that if the company decides that this criteria, this quality is the most important thing, I think the government should respect these private entities will to decide to choose people whichever they want, right? Government cannot just go and say, since you guys the qualification criteria go against our will, I'm gonna intervene you, I'm gonna distort your will. We don't think so. We strongly oppose to that kind of case. And second level analysis, in the perspective of religious institutions, well, they might come up here and say like, they talked about in their definition, they talked about religious foundations or religious institutions, right? So what the government might do if this motion passes, and just go to the church, maybe Catholic, and say that, I don't like this. We need to impose this equal opportunity legislation, and say that, you should put the female quota to the, kind of case to promote this kind of case. They might, under their logic, that could still happen, right? So we believe this is not the right choice. Because of two reasons. Firstly, it is a believer's right, when the people who belong to that foundation or belong to the institution, right? Because what we like to say in the first place, because the believer or the people who belong to that institution, they have the right to preserve the traditions or the things that they have been practicing for ages and ages, and they have a perfect right to do so. And government cannot go and intervene in this kind of case. Because in second level analysis, they are in the companies or foundation religious institution, there exists consensus society, which means that everyone acknowledges that we are fine with this. So they are individually practicing on their own. Government cannot just go and say, we don't like you, we cannot do that.
On the point.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Basically, in our society, when a company discriminates women just because they're women, government has the right to intervene and
Yes,
punish them.
the
Why
criteria
not
you are
religion?
giving it is wrong. The notion they're trying to possess here is that because of the certain right or certain things, sit down please, the companies are not legitimate enough to do that, but we don't think so. Companies have the perfect legitimate right to exercise what they want. And that leads to my second argument, which is the harms of interventions. Okay, firstly, we think that if this motion passes, we think the credibility of these institutions, or especially in the religious institutions, the leaders, will go down because what the people are witnessing is not like a willful choice or the voluntary exercise of this individual entity, or rather distorted, manipulated action by the government. So this private entity itself, the characteristic of private entity is the practicing what you want in your own will voluntarily. But now the people will see that these institutions are manipulated by the government on their own agenda, and we go strongly against on that point. So whatever I told you today, I have told you they have no justification whatsoever to distort and manipulate these private entities, which is religious institutions. And secondly, there are harms when intervention occurs. So for all that reason, we are very proud to oppose to this motion. Thank you.
7. We now invite the second speaker of the opening government.
Sorry for interrupting, but you have to use microphone. All the speakers. Thank you for your consideration.
Government intervenes so much. Air conditioner on. Can you turn it on? Hot. Are you hot? Yes. Oh, good.
Mr. Speaker, it seems that it's very unfortunate to see the opposition side how they're miscontextualizing the points that we are mentioning. Today we're having a debate on the society where every individual have inherent rights, such as freedom of choice and moreover freedom of religion in this case. We believe that currently the status quo is infringing upon those freedoms, and therefore as a responsible government we should intervene in today's case. So let's look at what the opposition side have brought up today. The first argument was saying that the government should actually be separated from the religion. Firstly, we believe how allowing every single individual being giving them opportunity is actually the intervention from the government. And secondly, even if it's an intervention from the government, when discriminatory happens to the minorities, we believe it's actually justifiable reason for the government to intervene. And I will explain more in my second rebuttals. Secondly, they said how companies have justified reason because they have the rights to distinguish who to employ or who to choose as their students or not. Firstly, we believe that government in the status quo still intervenes to the problem when there's a discrimination happens in the status quo. For example, in the status quo in the United States especially, government doesn't allow to have photos on the documents that they present to the companies to actually ask for the qualification. The major reason is because the pictures that may present the race, the ethnicity, and the gender might actually intervene into these equal opportunity legislation, and because of those reasons, government actually intervened into this case. So actually arguing that the employees actually have the rights, we believe that's actually firstly unjustifiable and discriminatory, and therefore the government has sufficient reason to intervene into this case. Secondly, they said how in the institution, it's actually believers' rights to do those things. Firstly, we're not talking about churches, how we should allow all these Buddhist people to enter the churches and listen to the lectures, but we're talking about the institution who are under the foundation of religion, and how those institutions, they should actually provide equal opportunity, and why it's actually beneficial for infringing upon these things. And secondly, they told you about the harms, how this credibility of the institution will be actually going to be harmed. Firstly, we're quite confused because we're not saying that we should mandate all these religious institutions to actually have a certain amount of quotas of those non-religious people. But what we're saying is we should actually distinguish to employ or to qualify certain individuals based on the equal opportunity legislation. And secondly, even if the government is actually intervening in those matters, we believe that we don't think that it's actually harming the credibility of the institution, but actually raising the credibility. Because the major credibility that the company can have is having anti-discriminatory policies, which includes having a equal opportunity legislation being implemented itself. So we believe that if the company actually passes this policy, it will actually increase the credibility of the companies and benefit the company itself. So before I move on to my substantive points, let's discuss what they have mentioned to our opposition, our wonderful Prime Minister's speech. Firstly, they told you how the freedom of choice is actually being intervened, and now the religion is actually not the first criteria they're talking about. Well, this statement actually indicates how the criteria that the companies actually require, such as religions or certain ethnic, is actually harmful in the status quo. This shows how having a criteria from the companies based on discriminatory factors is actually harmful, and that's why we're exactly proposing today's motion. And secondly, through the POIs and all these things, they have actually mentioned how the companies have actually rights to distinguish themselves. But we have clearly told you how the governments have justification reason to deal with these things. But however, unfortunately, the opposition side have failed to acknowledge the crucial point, how government is actually illegitimizing itself through double standards, and we hope the next speaker brought up this case and still proceed the debate. So, today, through my speech, I would like to state some more extensive points. Basically, I'm going to suggest one major harms and one major benefits that these religious institutions will have and prevent when we pass today's motion. So firstly, moving on to the harms, we believe that this discriminatory legislation from the religious government, religious institution, is actually going to backlash the religions. Yes, sir?
This is all double standards imposed by government, because when we talk about other industry in the government, what is government trying to propose equal opportunity affect those people in that country? But when you talk about religious, it's actually international problem.
In the status quo, the government is already having equal opportunity legislation because they acknowledge such discriminatory factors might intervene into this freedom of these citizens. We believe we are quite confused why government should not extend to the institution, religious institution, which is included in the institution existing in the government, existing in the nations. So, keeping moving on to the case, we believe that it will actually backlash in the religion itself. Because when they actually have this discriminatory process in deciding this employment or qualification of the students, it's actually isolating itself and stigmatizing itself from the society. We believe this is very crucial because they are actually being discriminated. They're actually choosing to discriminate from itself. Because the perspective from the citizens will be, oh, they are so discriminated, and the stigmatizing will happen because of their choice. In order to prevent that, we believe that this policy should pass. And secondly, we believe when you actually pass this motion, it will have one major benefit, because it will have the diversity groups that will benefit the society, the institution. Organization having diverse perspectives are very crucial because it actually can generate creative ideas, more creative ideas from these diverse perspectives. Let's look at the example of Macquarie, who is one of the leading companies in existing. One of the really vital factor of that organization is possessing is having a diverse members, like diverse genders, diverse race, diverse nationality, including diverse religions. This actually leads to more creative ideas and actually benefit the institution. Moreover, we believe when we actually limit the opportunity, they are blocking this benefits, and the skilled workers or skilled students that may be qualified but not qualified for the only criteria that they are not having certain religion, we're actually going to undermine this fact and very discriminatory, and the religion itself is blocking its benefits. Ladies and gentlemen, we told you today how it's actually, we're living in a society where this individual freedom is highly respected, and government should actually respect these things. If we do not pass today's motion, firstly it will harm freedom of choice. Secondly, it will harm the freedom of religion because it's indirectly forcing them. And lastly, we told you how the role of government is actually crucial to not have double standard, but actually have equal opportunity implemented. And we've shown you how this is actually benefiting not only the citizens, but the religious institution itself. Therefore, we are very proud to propose.
We're going to hear from the second speaker of the opening opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Okay, hearing the speeches from the opposition side, government side, it seems like the debate has been shifted to a different motion, which is whether to have affirmative action on the private companies or not. Mr. Speaker, in today's debate, they have taken extremely soft line and argued that companies and limited this debate into the companies and NGO that has a base ideology based on the religious right, religious institution. So before I move on to my constructive argument and tell you the long-term harms of this motion, I'd like to clarify some points and rebut to the points of their speeches. Okay, first of all, let me clarify the status quo, what's happening in the status quo. In the status quo, there's a large spectrum of religious institutions. There are some institutions that are quite public, secular, and there are some institutions that has a large characteristic of religious groups, such as like NGO, whose prime goal is to propagate their religion. So let me see the first case. In the first case, where such as a university or company based on religion, we believe that in the status quo, there's not so many problems of like discriminating people, right? However, when we move on to the second type of religious institution, which is like NGO based on religious belief, we believe that when the institution gets more religious, we see that like people or institution require more religious factor to the people who apply for their job, and we believe that that is perfectly okay. No, thank you. Perfectly okay, and government should acknowledge that in order to protect the minimum level of religious rights and the right of private company in order to protect their own identity and own prime goal. So now let me move on to my second rebuttal to clearly analyze the characteristic of religious institution. So far we could hear nothing. We could hear no analysis about the characteristic of a religious institution. However, we believe that religious institution has very distinctive nature from the other public or private company. Why? Firstly, no, thank you. No matter whether it's proposed as a company or NGO or university, we believe that their basic identity and basic goal is to promote their religion and to promote what their religion think is good, Mr. Speaker. No, thank you. And secondly, we believe that in religious institution, we believe that the appliers, the people who apply for the religious institution, we believe that they are quite consented. They have already consented to the rule of their religion, and they have consented to follow the rule that the religious group has provided. No, thank you. So now then, let me move on to my third rebuttal. Whether government has legitimacy of intervening in these cases. Okay, Mr. Speaker, they said that government has duty and right to promote its equality in all over the world. However, Mr. Speaker, we don't think so. We basically believe that government has right and duty to promote equality in the public sector. However, when it comes to the private sector, what government has to prioritize is not the social rule or law. Government has to rather prioritize the private right and religious right for the better society. No, thank you. And why? Because the private sector, such as religion, there are like groups of people who have already consented to follow the rules and doctrines of religion. So in this case, we believe the government has no incentive, no justification of intervening in these cases. And lastly, even if we concede that those religious institution has like private, is more public than private, we still believe that government is doing too far and intervening the right of private institution. Why? Mr. Speaker, no, thank you. In the first place, the role and purpose of private institution is not to boost up equality of society, Mr. Speaker. We believe that their basic identity and basic purpose is to pursue their interests. In case of like company, their basic purpose is to maximize their interest. In case of NGO, their basic purpose is to propagate their agenda, right? And we believe that we should, no thank you, we believe that we have to protect and boost up that kinds of role, because we believe that in our society, by each actor fulfilling their role, we believe that society can function very well. So in this case, no thank you, we believe the government is putting too much burden on the private sector to go in the limit that it seriously harm their right. So let me move on to my constructive argument, which is the long-term harms, of this policy. Mr. Speaker, we believe that this motion will actually going to open the floodgate of government intervention to the religious sector. Now let me explain you why.
More information.
Yes.
In case of cultural activities like cannibalism has been banned and not allowed because the Constitution believes that everybody has a fundamental human right to survival.
Mr. Speaker, so they have to explain you that why private institution, like religious institution, should have responsibility to actually accept the social norm the government is forcing to them. Okay, no, thank you. Now let me move on to my constructive argument about the long-term harm of this motion. So Speaker, we believe that by implementing this motion, we are actually opening the flooding gate of governmental intervention to the private sector, which is religious group. So Speaker, this is very harmful to the religious belief, to the religion itself and the believer who are believing in the religion. Why? So Speaker, in the Constitution, not only like right of equality, we also prioritize, we also really care the right of religion, because we consider the right of religion as an important thing of self-actualization in the status quo. So therefore, if governments start to enforcing their secular rules in the private sector, especially in the religious sector, we believe that we're actually going too much and offending the believers of that religion. So because of this reason, Mr. Speaker, we believe that this important motion should not pass in the first place. So whatever I told you today, Mr. Speaker, we believe that their arguments about like forcing the unfair burden to the private sector can be applied to the religious group, because religious institution has special characteristic, which is like consent of their members. So because of these reasons, we are very happy to oppose. Thank you.
709. Now move on to the debate in the lower house and call upon the member of the president.
Mr. Speaker, what we want to do as the government side is not here to tolerate religion itself. But what we think is that the society always has a priority. And the priority that we are setting is the legislative role of the government, which are coming from the Constitution as well as the rule and regulations. Ladies and gentlemen, we are not here to regulate every single action that religious entities are doing. But what we are here to tolerate and cut off is the undesirable and unfair activities that this religious institution is doing under the name of religious activity. Ladies and gentlemen, as the closing half, we'd like to first explain what has been presented within the opening half of the debate, and then further extend to our extension and explain to you why it is so important that we care about this equal right legislation in terms of religious institutions. Let's first go on to the rebuttals of the previous speaker and the opening opposition. They firstly told you that it is important that we maintain the tradition of a certain culture and certain religion. But ladies and gentlemen, the thing that we have to recognize at this moment is that culture and social norm, as well as religious interpretation, is subject to be changed, ladies and gentlemen. Once there was a time when we don't accept people to believe in certain kind of religion, like Muslim or Christianity, just because they have a specific gender and specific skin color, or specific regions. So in this situation, ladies and gentlemen, since the Constitution has been implemented throughout the society to influence these religions, the religious activities and interpretation have changed to adopt to the society's social norms, where the society has equal rights, where the society can have a consensus among the certain kind of legitimate actions. So therefore, it's okay that we intervene to religion if it's justified under the social norm and social justice system, which I'll further explain. Moving on to the second point rebuttal. They stated that university and other institutions are independent, therefore they should not be infringed and interfered by the government and government legislation. But ladies and gentlemen, the fact that we have to admit is that every institution that exists within our society is under the influence of the government. Government base sets the social structure where individuals can set their basis, like setting schools, setting religious activities, as well as setting a certain kind of corporations. Even if the religion wants to have their own autonomy, ladies and gentlemen, they have to be abiding by the certain kind of rule that has been set by the government. They are subsidized by taxing to a certain degree, and they are giving an opportunity to be evade the tax to a certain degree in certain kind of cases. The government is actually giving a grant for this religious institution to settle down. In return, they have to complement and compensate back to society by following the rules and social norms. And now moving on to the third point, ladies and gentlemen, they say intervention is unjustified, but the thing that we have at this moment is that we have a laws and legislation where the companies cannot discriminate men and women just because of their genders. We have a law and we have a constitution which prevents that kind of discrimination to take place within private sectors. Why can't we expand this to the other entities like religious practices? Some of the religious practices are banned within our society because it does not abide by the social norms and social contract that we have made within our society. So we think it is absolutely justifiable if this religious institutions are going against the social norm and the rules that we set within our society. Now, moving on to our extension, and yes.
The companies that you're talking about, they do not get the tax. They pay the tax to society. Why this specific specific measure has to be implemented in infringing private companies' rights?
They are implemented because we think constitution and laws and rules and social norms is much more important than the profit of a specific company. That is why the companies are abiding by this law rather than going against and taking measures to abuse this kind of law and make illegal actions. Now moving on to the extension, why these religious institutions are so important in terms of dealing with equal opportunity legislation. Ladies and gentlemen, equal opportunity legislation is a policy to change the social norm, changing an idea of an individual person. We have to change the social norm to create an atmosphere where everybody can have an equal opportunity. In order for us to present an equal right for women, we have to have a social consensus that women can be treated equally in every single procedure. However, ladies and gentlemen, when we talk about religious institutions, the problem is that they start to manipulate this idea and try to implement a very strong biases into their minds. Because the religious activities sometimes use emotion as well as Bible and say that the God said so, therefore you cannot have a certain kind of rules. And since this kind of illogical unbiased ideas are implemented within the people's mindset, it's very dangerous and difficult for people to change this concept. So therefore, ladies and gentlemen, even if this equal right legislation are presented within our society, people who believe in certain kind of law and certain kind of religion will not be abiding by these rules because they have a certain kind of religious belief which tells them this equal right of legislation that is not necessary within our society because their God said so. So what happens within this situation is that there will be a biases in terms of hiring people within this religious institutions, which doesn't have anything to do with certain kind of religious practices. When you see the case of EWHA Women's University, if you don't go to chapel, you don't get to graduate your school. What happens in this situation? We are actually abusing this religion to have a certain kind of degree. And the reason why people don't go against this kind of principle is because they want to stay within the situation, within the school, right? The school legislations are basically composed of Christian people who have a strong belief in terms of Christianity. And in those situations, it is difficult for people to advocate their right. It is difficult for them to challenge this kind of institution because the institution is basically formulated with Christian people. However, ladies and gentlemen, these kind of institutions are subsidized and created by the whole society. In this situation, what we have to consider at this moment is that we have to have a certain kind of legitimacy of a certain kind of law that we have within our society, like presenting an equal right to every single individual, regardless of their own religion. And what other things that we can see within the society is that there are situations where even the people who believe in specific religions are discriminated within their religious context. So we see the case of Christianity, ladies and gentlemen, where basically most of the people are men who are ruling this party and ruling this kind of practices that are taking place. They say this is a religious practice and tradition, but ladies and gentlemen, in those situations, they make statements like violating women's rights, discriminating women into certain countries. In terms of Korea, ladies and gentlemen, we have tons of churches mostly owned and operated by men. In this situation, we see a serious discrimination of women taking place even within these religious institutions. So we think it is important that we have an equal right legislation expand into religious institutions so that we can change the mindset of the people. Because the biases that these religious people have is something that we cannot change just because we have a recommendation, recommendation for people. Moving on to the second point of extension, ladies and gentlemen, it is important that society has a certain kind of norms of meritocracy and fair treatment and fair competition. Within a democratic society where fair competition is taking place, it is important that government tell people that it is going to be okay for you to succeed and make progresses if you try really hard. However, ladies and gentlemen, what these religious institutions are doing is that no matter how hard you try, you cannot survive in EWHA Women's University if you don't check chapel. And we think this is totally biased and totally unfair for certain individuals just because they don't have a certain kind of religious belief. So ladies and gentlemen, considering all this factor, since the religious institution itself is founded under the basis of the social norms and social justice and constitutions where the government provides certain kind of ground for them to survive, we think it's important that they follow the law and the social norms that we set under the constitution and legislation, and therefore we are proud to propose.
We're now here from the opposition member.
Good afternoon, Mr. Speakers, ladies and gentlemen, members of the houses.
in this debate, we see from the open opportunity side, they mention about justification of this policy, of this kind of unequal opportunity right now in the status quo, and about what's long-term harms to actually abandon this kind of unequal opportunities and to make the religious institution being intervened by the government. So what we're going to talk as a closing opposition, first of all, we're going to prove 3 things. First is about the equal opportunity that the governments are trying to propose. We believe that even if you pass this policy, even if you try to think that the equal opportunity legislation should be actually extend to religious institutions, we don't believe that this kind of equal opportunity can actually be achieved. Second thing is, I don't believe that the discrimination problem raised by the government side is actually a problem right now in this debate in the status quo. Third thing, they actually neglect and ignore the tangible harms if they really pass this policy. I'm going to elaborate more in my further extension. So, before I move on, I have 4 questions to raise for the whole government side. First of all, they're trying to say that because this kind of social norm is actually a trend in the society, that's why the government should actively intervene and take away the right of those kind of corporations to decide, no thank you, to decide who is the best person for you to hire, who is the most best candidate for you to do so. We don't believe that because we believe that this kind of right is also supposed to be enjoyed by this kind of employees, and they still have the ability to find what's the best candidates, what's the best employee under different criteria. I believe that religious belief is actually a very important criteria where we are dealing with religious angels and religious university. No thank you. And even though you're saying they pass this policy, I don't believe that those employees without sharing the same religious belief, they would like to work in that institution as well. Because they know that their rights is not being put on the spotlight, their rights is not being the major focus of that institution. They know that what they're believing is actually somehow against the belief of the institution. So even though the government is actually legalizing this kind of policy, doesn't mean that the employees actually have more intention and more motivation to work in those companies. So at first place, I don't believe that this is effective policy. No thank you. Second rebuttal. They say that because we should not discriminate people just because of their different gender, we should not discriminate people just because of the different belief. But the problem is when we talk about gender ethnicity, it's actually very different from religious belief. We believe that gender and ethnicity, yes, we should protect this equal opportunity for different gender ethnicity. But what we are doing here in this debate is about religious belief. This is actually a very crucial criteria when the religious institutions, when religious entities actually trying to find a person to hire. Because what those organizations always share is first about their policies, second about the mission, first about their goal. When dealing with policies, it's very likely that this religious institution, they will only pass on policies which is also beneficiary to those people, to those minority groups who are sharing the same religious. That's why they don't really necessarily want to work with people against their belief, against their will. So I see that they actually have legitimacy to hire people without this belief. No thank you. Second way is about the mission and also about the goal. Because even though this kind of NGOs are trying to do some charitable work and donation to people, but at the same time, we also agree that this kind of religious and this kind of institution, at the same time when they're working, they also try to preach their religious to different part of the world. So what is actually the benefit? What's actually good to the people without necessarily the same religious have to work in that institution, have to stuck in that belief all the time? No thank you. Third rebuttal, we don't believe that by saying the change of social norm is actually a reason for you to intervene the religious in any scale. Because we believe that once you pass this policy, there will be a lot of other policies to be happened in the future. So what's the government trying to do? To just use this kind of social norm as a skill to intervene the legitimacy of the independency of this kind of religious, which has established many years ago, even before the establishment of any government. No thank you. And we talk about the majority actually pay a lot of money tax to this institution. I don't think so, because eventually the majority of the production, majority of the revenue is still being generated by the people inside that institution who share the same religious belief, by the people who work in there. So that's why we don't believe that we are actually doing something against the taxpayers in the society. First extension, yes.
Right, if the companies are totally okay with hiring whatever person that they want, why do you have legislation which allows people, which prevents companies to discriminate certain kind of gender?
I explained very clearly, right? Gender ethnicity is actually different as a criteria from religious belief. Religious belief is crucial to this institution. That's why the government have no legitimacy to intervene. No thank you. First extension, why the government should not intervene religious in any scale. Because what is the spirit of religious? About secularity, it's about tolerance. If the government can actually cooperate with the religious, it can actually bring a lot of tangible harms. And we also believe that when the establishment of those religions, they're not intent to fight against the society. They're not intent to act against the society. This kind of rules and this kind of orders is somehow being established, it's somehow being built many years ago. We don't understand the trace. But the problem is, once we have this kind of different minority, different association in society, we have to learn how to respect them. We have to learn how to give them autonomy dealing with this kind of people. Especially we believe that by choosing to pick which person to hire, we don't necessarily impact and harm the whole majority of the society. That's why we don't believe that this problem raised by the government side is significant enough for the government to do something to act against this kind of institution. No, thank you. And also believe that this kind of religious belief is actually a way to actually combine people together. It's actually constructing the community. So what you're doing is not only focusing on those, it's not only attacking, it's not only targeting on those religious institutions. Take a second. But the problem is, it's also fights against this belief in all those believers who have shared the same religions, who have also shared the same meanings. And we believe that these believers who share the same beliefs is actually willing to compromise. They're willing to sacrifice their certain right. They're willing to do whatever the religious they want. It's not by the government policy to actually to direct them what to do and what not to do. Yes.
According to their logic, different nationalities cannot work together because they were raised from different backgrounds. How does religion is mutually exclusive from other backgrounds that they are considering?
If one employer actually believes that a Chinese and Englishman cannot work together, he has the right to think about what's the best criteria for this employee. But the problem when we talk about religious belief, I've already explained to you very clearly, because the goal and mission inside these institutions is always mainly focused on the religious, and that's why we don't believe that this kind of employees and candidates is actually suitable. And the problem when we talk about discrimination, we don't believe that discrimination actually happens, because discrimination only happens if the affected group of people actually think that they are being the inferior, they are being so somehow subordinate. But the problem is, right now, if you do not share the same religious belief with that group of institution, you will not likely to feel discriminated. Just take an example. If I'm taking a job interview, if the future employee actually tell me that I have to learn about the basic computer skills, if I know that I do not acquire these skills, I will not feel discriminated just because I'm not hired. Because I know that at first place, I do not fulfill the criteria, I do not fulfill the expectation. That's why I'm not hired. It's not about really the discrimination, it's not really about the social norms. Second extension about why this actually detrimental harms. Because we believe that any scale of intervention against religious conflicted by the government is actually a very problem. Just as a religious conflicts, those people have chaos. What we can see a lot of cases like in French, like in British. This kind of people, they actually bring some arrest and protests and demonstrations against this government, just because the government is actually intervening the belief, intervening the rules, intervening the orders. That's why we think that the government should not actually impose a superficial policy just to say because it's actually about equal opportunity and neglect the harms, neglect the legitimacy of those institutions, neglect the legitimacy of the religious belief. Therefore, we back to oppose. Thank you very much.
We had this pre-quarter, I call on the government, please. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Yep, there we go. Anyways, in today's debate, I hear a lot of quick speakers, and that's kind of confusing me, and I don't want to do that, all that kind of stuff, but rather I'd like to talk about slowly so that you can understand what we're trying to prove. Ladies and gentlemen, in today's debate, the main issue is that we are talking about the criteria that is not about the capability of individuals, but rather the expectation of individuals to fulfill their roles, that they are in the equal position as with others, regardless of their religion, regardless of their gender. And that's why we already see in today's world such equal opportunity legislation, such for the gender differences and also the races, as the opening has mentioned, like not putting the photo on their regimen and so on and stuff, ladies and gentlemen. But the necessity here in today's debate is that religious institutions are found with belief. Certain people go to certain religion with their belief towards that religion, ladies and gentlemen. Their belief is so strong that sometimes it had to be, if they are doing wrong, sometimes it had to be fixed with force. And in these cases, religious believers are quite strong ones, and we do believe that when they cause such harm to our society, that it is the government's all the right and all duty to actually go in and intervene in such cases to fix and change the world, change the religious institution to the better one, so that we can cohesively live together, ladies and gentlemen. So basically, I'd like to go on a little about what the member of the government side has mentioned. He basically talked about how discrimination are actually happening in the current status quo and how these discrimination are actually affecting the world in the worsen situation, such as that these employment chances or even with the beliefs of these people actually affecting individuals in the wrong way, and they are actually, these religious institutions are actually benefiting off from society, and yet they do not necessarily give back what they have received from the society legitimately. Then let's go on to the rebuttals of today's point. Well, first of all, social norms and integration. Yes, who is it to do and all this kind of setting criteria is very important for individual companies and for individual religious institutions. Yes, we believe. However, as long as they are based on criteria of expectation on which the capability of individuals, surely, yes, companies have certain profit to seek, and if certain individuals do not fit that expectation of capability, which one can actually practice and learn and actually have more efficiency on, sure. However, with the belief of own individuals, we believe this should not be intervened by any religious institution as according to their own belief, ladies and gentlemen. Then they talked about the applicants not liking it. Ladies and gentlemen, we are not talking about whether the applicant is actually in for the religion or not for the religion. However, we are talking about these people who are seeking for chances to get jobs and chances to be in certain companies, chances to work for certain things. And in these cases, we do greatly see that there are discrimination going on in today's world, ladies and gentlemen. The third thing, the gender and religion, they are not so different two things, ladies and gentlemen. They're actually, to come to think of it, in cultures of other different religions and also genders, we do see that there are differences of innate differences that they are born with, or sometimes that they are raised with. And in these cases, we do see that these are personal things that should not intervene, should not matter with their work life or social life. Before I go on, closing.
Because when you think like the race, the genders, that is social lottery you get from your parents. You can never change it. But for the some social lotteries like your education, like your religion choose, that is things you can change.
Religion is sometimes innate and sometimes it is given to you, and it is the life that you have along with your life, with your parents, as you said, and sometimes these things cannot be changed, and sometimes these things cannot be changed, as we said, with the possession that is so strong, we need to intervene in these cases. And with the religious institution that they have already so strong in perceptions on these issues, we believe they pose harm to other people who are outside of their religion. That's why we are going for these kind of issues here today, ladies and gentlemen. And also, and then let's go to the clashes of today's debate. First one is the line of government intervention. Where is the line that the government can actually come in for intervention and where it's not? From how we heard from the opposition side, they are mentioning there should be total denial of any intervention from the government to any sector of privacy or public companies, ladies and gentlemen. How about the role of government? No, thank you. The role of government, when there's social norm, social belief, or social justice that is harmed by certain individual or an individual, then the government should actively take a part in to fix such problems so that there will be no disadvantages to any one particular people, ladies and gentlemen. And in this case, especially to the social working related organization, that is including universities and religious institutions or NGOs, we do know that there are harms that are posed by such kind of cases. In other cases like economics, when there's a certain harm posed by any individuals, the government intervenes, and that is the government's role that we expect them to play. When there's a harm posed, we are protected by the government, ladies and gentlemen. So discrimination and prejudice should be kept away, and there will not be any misuse of autonomy by any institution, such as religious ones, ladies and gentlemen. And then before I go on to the second class, yes ma'am.
So if you start taking off the religious spectrum from the religious institution, how can you call it a religious institution?
Ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, there we go. The second question is actually directly connected to our point. Religious institution, we are not trying to change the mindset of the religious people or religious institution. What we are trying to do, when there's a harm posed by these individuals without any basis of rationale that is justifiable to actually discriminate these people, we are trying to stop such from happening. So why then are we trying to expand this equal opportunity legislation to the religious institution, ladies and gentlemen? First of all, as they are serving and interacting with society, because they are religious institutions, many people rely on it, and many people are interacting with such kind of institutions, ladies and gentlemen. Even with university, we have set the definition as these kind of things are closely related to our daily lives and also our daily issues that we deal with, ladies and gentlemen. However, sometimes we do see the religious believers sometimes are biased, they could be discriminatory to non-followers or people simply outside of their beliefs, ladies and gentlemen. This perception needs to be fixed. That's how we fix the perception regarding the gender differences, and that's when the time of ladies were discriminated by mankind. In these kind of cases, sometimes people don't simply change because they're told to, because people are educated to do so. However, what we need to do then as the government, as a responsible government, we need to try to actually actively participate so that these people, these companies, these institutions who are benefited from the society can actually donate back and actually make the society a better one by allowing everyone to participate actively so that we can see the changes and so that we can see the active betters to happen, ladies and gentlemen. Thus, we strongly go for this motion.
We had a tiny bit I call for the opposition victory.
Ladies and gentlemen, we believe the equal opportunity legislation is not actually universal.
Ladies and gentlemen, we firmly believe that the equal opportunity legislation is not actually a universal principle that we should, as the government, and apply it to every aspect in our life, especially for those individual institutions and individual corporations. And also, as the closing opposition side, we want to point out is we will not only uphold the secularity, the spirit of the secularity in our society, but also want to focus on the spirit of toleration and also want to uphold the spirit of respect of the differences in our society. So now, before actually there are two questions I want to ask in today's debate. First one is whether those equal opportunity legislations is really a universal principles we should apply and that which will require our government to intervene. And second one is whether their policy creates some backlash or our policy creates some backlash to the whole society. Now, first move back to the first questions. Because our answer, because as the opposition side, our answer is no. Because we think the equal opportunity legislation, the principle is not, it cannot be universally applied. Why? Because first of all, we think for those NGOs, for those individual corporation institutions, they have their right to choose what kind of employees. They have some features and characteristics which is compatible to the features of the religious institution. So, sorry, no time. So we think that is the reason why that the people who work in those institutions, who have some religious belief, that is the reason, that is the feature we can call that the religious institution as a religious institution. And second thing is about, we talk about reality things, because we think actually there's no motivation for those non-believers of certain religion to join in some religious institutions, right? Because we think as the power, as the nature of the religions, that is the root cause of some believers to really join in some NGO, some religious institutions. So we think, as they mentioned about the so-called discrimination problem, but we think, but we think the discrimination problem must be assessed when those people, they feel that they are inferior. So in this case, we can find actually there's no people, they feel okay, they want to, they have those motivation to join and they are treated unequally. Sorry, no time. And second, what I talk about is actually, as I raised in my POI, is because we think we should draw a line in the criteria or prospects given by the religious institution. Because we think like the race, like the genders, they are the natural lotteries you inherit from your parents, which means you can never change in the later life when you grow up. But how about like your education background, like your religious belief? That is things called the social lottery, which you can change. We can like which you can re-choose in your life. So we think actually see these things, we should draw a line here, and it is okay for our government to intervene if you find